While many of you were waiting for this to kick off, you completed our poll that illuminates the breakdown of the roles that you're all in and the industries you represent. There's no surprise that more than 50% of you represent skills and roles outside of design, and that you pretty much represent every sector out there today. This is testament to the reality that in recent years, the term user experience design has become a buzzword. It's a rapidly growing field, and that's in large part because it's a key value driver in the future economy. And the pace of digitization has only accelerated over the last few months, and forcing entire industries to adopt new digital strategies. Great user experiences are front and center in the online first world. And as things keep changing, understanding your audience has never been more essential. Ultimately, good design is good business. Maya Angelou actually inadvertently captured the impact of good design brilliantly when she said, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. So today, we're going to explore how the world's best brands, their designers, and digital product owners adjusted to this new reality, and what trends they've noticed, and what we can expect for the future. So I couldn't be more thrilled to welcome Tracy Lee, Klaus Quiche, Jason Manti, and Aaron Essex, all of whom are highly respected in this field, working on the bleeding edge of this dynamic discipline as it continues to shape the way we experience so many aspects of life. So without delay, I'm going to welcome each of them to introduce themselves, starting with Jason. Hi, Jason, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Perfectly. Hey, Jason, good to see you, buddy. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Of course. Good to see you too. Yeah, so a little background on me. I'm currently the GM and founder of an unannounced startup that's in Area 120, which is the incubator that's inside of Google. Previous to that, I was VP of product design at a fashion tech startup that was acquired by a large search company. And before that, I was head of product design and content at Vine, which was owned by Twitter.
Amazing. Well, we can't wait to hear your experience as it pertains to the power of design and how you're accelerating products. Thanks, Jason.
Appreciate it.
Next up is Klaus. Hi, Klaus. Are you there?
I sure am. Hello.
Thanks so much for joining us today.
My pleasure, and thank you for having it. It's having me. It's an incredible privilege to be here. Not just with the 2,000 or so folks that are on the line, but with these three distinguished guests that I have. It's just an honor to be here with design thinkers from three industries, three brands that I know personally and love and use almost every day. So yes, my name is Klaus Quiche. I am an experienced design director at Capital One. My team is responsible for everything in the journey from product selection, how does a user determine what financial product is right for them, through account opening, and then through the onboarding process, the first 60 days in getting set up for success. It's a pretty broad journey, a wonderful scope, and I could not be happier to be in the role that I am and working with the team that I have. My background is in publishing and branding and interactive for arts and entertainment brands. And in the last 5-6 years, I started migrating more to into the role of a financial industry designer. So that's where I am now. And I don't want to forget that I am a happiness practitioner. And I do believe that is my purpose, not just at Capital One, but in my career. And I try to make it a part of my everyday life. I'm no expert in happiness, but I feel like my purpose is I'm here to help you, each of you, find your own happiness in your role and in life.
Wonderful. Thank you, Klaus. Wonderful introduction. Looking forward to unpacking this topic. Next up is Aaron Essex. Hi, Aaron.
Hey, and man, anytime I'm like around Klaus or if you follow him on Instagram, like there's so much good energy.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Yes. Definitely happy to be here as well. So yeah, director of UX and product design at Shutterstock, where I was thrilled to join a little over 2 years ago. There, I oversee a UX team that works on everything inside Shutterstock, even the stuff that you do not see. So there is a lot going on in enterprise, native apps, our contributor experience. Yes, you can submit photos to Shutterstock. and there was an experience around that. And then also like our editing tools and a utility that we have at Shutterstock to manipulate those assets. Prior to that, I worked in an agency for a long time, doing a lot of different types of problem solving and managing a team there. And then I took a little vacation and worked at a startup for a little while. And that is a joke because working at a startup is a lot of work. But yes, and now I'm at Shutterstock. I also teach at BrainStation. So if you're interested in UX courses, look out for me. Yeah. And in addition to that, I love doing storytelling in my free time. So you'll often see me on the stage at the Moth. So if you listen to that podcast, you should know what that is. And I'm also a new beekeeper, and I just pulled my first honey pull this past weekend. So
amazing. What a great hobby to pick up in this shelter in place. Brilliant. Erin, thank you so much. And I know that all of our learners that get the opportunity to learn from you absolutely love it. So thank you for being part of our community too.
Thank you.
And last but certainly not least is Tracy Lee from the New York Times. Hi, Tracy.
Hi, I'm Tracy, product design director at the Times. I work within the growth mission and customer care. And the groups that I work with are really thinking about that relationship with our subscribers, really reinforcing the value of a subscription, being able to manage subscription, and also giving people the tools internally through customer care to support our subscribers. And I've been in the publishing industry for a long time, and I kind of stumbled into it. I was really fascinated with the technology of blogs back in the day. And with that, I joined a consultancy that was helping legacy publishers figure out like how to use blogs, grow audiences. And from there, I went to a digital first publisher in thinking about like storytelling, again, building the audience, growing that brand. And from there, I ended up at the Times. And so, yeah, and I'm really excited to be with all of you to discuss how to be building exciting digital experiences.
Starting with Jason, if you don't mind. Jason, all of us might have heard about the principle at Google of the 20% of their time being focused on passion projects. And this is a primary focus of Area 120, where you lead an innovation incubator responsible for rapidly building, testing, and launching dozens of novel ideas, essentially pushing the limits of design. You landed this opportunity following an incredible career in doing just that. I'd love to understand your point of view around what are your thoughts on what's table stakes today when it comes to the skill sets essential to being comfortable with acceleration without compromising quality?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that's interesting about that question is even just the idea of like defining what quality is. And so that would probably be like the first thing that I would say to anybody that's asking me that, and they're in a startup or they're trying to build something new, is making sure that you're really getting on the same page with the rest of your team about what that means. And that kind of ties into, I guess, like the first big thing, which would just be this ability to be able to define and kind of build out a shared language amongst you and your team. So I think, it's very easy for people to believe that they're on the same page when they're not. And I'm sure, all of us have experienced that. But I think that when talking about a skill set and being able to move really quickly, one of those I think that's really, really important is being able to spend the time up front to try to understand, how are we talking about this? What do we mean when we say these different words? And what is the kind of shared language that we use so that we can make sure that we're not having to constantly have like clarifying questions or redefining things as we're kind of going through and making decisions. I'd say probably the next thing would be like the skill of being able to prevent and kind of check yourself and others on tunnel vision. So, the things that we all build, we build for people, and it's very easy for us to trick ourselves into thinking that they care about our product in the same way that we do, which is just not the case. And so, yeah, being able to just kind of be real with yourself and check yourself as well as the people on your team, and remember that, the people that we build things for have no obligation to use or learn how to use our products. And so it's really on us to make sure that we do the work there. So I'd say probably the last thing is just the ability to just change your mind and be okay with that and be open with that. That's like something that I'm pretty excited about in terms of just like a value with the teams that I work with, and really pushing that and reminding us to be able to say, hey, the reason why I'm changing my mind is because I believe this new approach is going to, better align with what we're trying to do, whether it's the vision or the values that we're trying to offer, and really being okay with that. Because I think it's very easy to get into kind of, weird scenarios where people feel like if they're changing their mind, it seems like they, don't know what they're doing, or maybe they're going to have people lose confidence in them. But I think, being open with that and having kind of sense of trust with your team that you can do that, I think is super important. So yeah, those would be some of the things that I think are really important to be able to build out things quickly.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jason. That's a great answer. I'd like to move to Klaus now. Klaus, Capital One acquired Adaptive Path in 2014. Since then, Capital One's design team has also grown to over 500 designers across the US, including authors, PhDs, inventors, and more. This is enormous proof around the emphasis businesses, both big and small, are placing on the power of design to drive growth. What are a few examples that you've seen businesses, what examples have you seen where businesses succeed both in terms of their customer satisfaction and business growth on the P&L in terms of the application of user experience design?
Yeah, thank you. I think there's something that Jason said that I want to speak to real quick, and that was developing a common language. And I think that speaks to one of the things I love about Capital One and their commitment to design thinking, and that is developing systems and shared platforms and shared approach or process to how we attack a problem or how we approach it. That I think it benefits everyone. That thing that you said, Jason, about being open, we all should be approaching problem solving with open arms. But the key of your question is examples. And while I don't know, I can't speak to their P&L, and I haven't really read much on their user feedback. But I will say a brand that I've seen do it really well, and I've been following them, using them, interacting with them since the beginning, is Spotify. There's a couple of things that I think that are noticeable or worth noting. They've adapted and evolved based on their listening and learning from their customers. First of all, they started off as a platform for finding and listening to music. It was like it was our new music library. It's grown into much more than just a library of music, but rather a platform where users can not only listen to the music, but start connecting with the musicians. So it's evolved and grown into a platform for content creators, and not just a platform for them to create the content, but to make that connectivity between the creators and their audience. That I love that. And then in terms of the evolution of the platform itself, that they've adopted podcasting, for example. As these new platforms arise, they've been very smart with integrating that into their system of offerings in a way that feels organic, natural, real, and it's just so easy to adapt. The last thing I'll say about it is that they talk to me like they know me. And I know that there are algorithms in the background. I'm no fool, but I really appreciate and have grown to love. I liked it back in the Pandora days, following the Music Genome Project. But I love that the recommendations that they make are so spot on, and they're getting better all the time. So I know that it's machine learning and AI happening in the background, but I relate it to the brand overall, and it gives me a good feeling to know that I can trust the recommendations. Final point is they make the experiences easy to share. So while yes, they're building that connectivity between musicians, creators, and their audience, they're making it easy for me to share this experience and share the music and the inspirations, the podcasts and things like that I love with my friends and family. So it has, in a way, become an extension of myself. That part of me that is fed by and inspired by music. They're making it easy for me to socialize and atomize that and share it with my world.
Yeah, and ultimately, that experience will create stickiness, which ultimately in a subscription-based model results in growth. It's just intuitive at the end of the day. So good example. And thanks for highlighting all those key areas that matter from a design standpoint, and also leveraging AI and data that make the experience that much more enjoyable. Aaron, I'd like to turn to you now. There's a common belief that as a company goes public, they become slower innovators. However, Shutterstock has an impressive history of staying up to date with customer needs. What do you think contributes to this culture, and how do you support your team in using design to drive growth?
Yeah, I mean, I really think that entrepreneurial, like innovative spirit comes from our founder, John Oringer. He, developed the company 17 years ago, and that spirit lives on today with our team, but also with our leadership and Stan and Avi. But I love this question because one, well, thank you on behalf of everybody at Shutterstock. That's awesome to hear. But the second thing is there's so much more to come that we're working on. So it's a really exciting time to be at Shutterstock. But one of the ways that Shutterstock helps foster this culture is creating a safe space where we can really spitball ideas and ideate quickly. And so we really do that from the lens of like, what is helpful to the customers, what is achievable, and how can we push those boundaries? The other way is we actually, like all companies or a lot of companies, they have company hackathons. I think ours is really great because there's a ton of projects that have come out of hackathons that we have put in production that have changed the way people are interacting with our content. One of the more fun ones I was involved in is putting AR into our native apps and showing how people can, engage with our assets in a totally new way using new technology. So that's really fun. As far as supporting the team, we have an amazing UX team at Shutterstock. So they really just drive the conversation from just like the tiniest little spark of an idea to the full-fledged product that it ends up becoming. They're curious, they're talented, and they're great communicators of their ideas. So from a director level, they really make it easy for me to help support them because they are so talented. They're really a UX dream team, so to speak.
That's awesome. Thanks, Aaron. Great answer. And we can't wait to unpack more in terms of thoughts you have. And Tracy, the New York Times, as we all know, has evolved its digital strategy brilliantly over the last decade and adapted to the digital era of publishing so well. Since March, when access to the most objective and up-to-date news became like oxygen for everyone, how did your team support that initiative in terms of pivoting the design roadmap or accelerating the features you had in mind but were needed overnight?
This is such a great question. I mean, I think for all of us, it was so uncertain at the beginning of March, what was happening. And especially in the growth mission, it's like, how are we going to support our subscribers? And also identifying folks who from, underrepresented groups, what can we do for them? And one of those groups that we identified was students. We have an existing program with Verizon where students at Title I schools, which are which have 40% of households are low income, have free access to the New York Times. And we thought, well, what if we could expand access to more students? Because, a remote learning environment, no one was prepared for this. So what could we do? And so we agreed, okay, we're going to give students access. So we had 2 weeks. We had 2 weeks to completely launch something. And so we reprioritized. We had more than 100 people come together across functions to say, let's look at this whole journey. What can we do from designing from like the awareness of the campaign all the way through to getting students access. And we have an existing flow, but by doubling that access to 14 million people, like that was going to be a big challenge. So, working within that time constraint, looking at the technical constraints as well as compliance, all of those things, product design, we have to come up with something that's going to work. And so, we came together in those 2 weeks and we were able to launch this program. And it was basically from April 6th to July 6th. So we met that user need for students who had access. There was really great participation, so much great feedback. And so there's that immediate user need, but I think strategically, it was also an opportunity for the Times to be thinking about that longer term relationship with people, because so often through user research, we hear that, people have relationships with the Times from when they were exposed, like in college or school. And so that it's a much longer game, right? It's about that whole entire journey, a lifetime journey. And so I really loved how that program really answered both, that immediate user need, pivoting to answer this thing that came out of nowhere, but then like looking at that bigger picture strategically.
Incredible. I can just imagine 100 professionals coming together virtually, might I add, to solve the problem. How it feels like acceleration and innovation is just going to become the norm now. Not that it's a bad thing, but it's certainly interesting in terms of how many more great innovations and great ideas are going to come to the market. Great, guys. Thank you so much for those insights. We're going to move into group questions now, and starting with Aaron, hopefully followed by Tracy, and with others building. Please tell us about your team's ways of working and how they were affected during COVID-19, and what trends did you see with your customers and their behaviors, and how did you address those needs?
Yeah, I think like many tech companies, we're actually doing pretty well working from home, which I feel a little indifferent about because I miss the office a lot. But we've adapted really well, and we're doing a lot to stay connected as if we were in an office setting. We have lots of trivia that we're doing, happy hours, baby showers, and we actually had a virtual farm tour recently, Loving Arms Animal Sanctuary. They had a cow join our meeting. So if you ever want Tito the cow, you can book Tito the cow. So we've been really trying to have fun with this as much as we can because it is a difficult time for a lot of people. As far as our customers are concerned, we certainly started to see some impact starting in March, for sure. But we saw our customers' behavior shifting to the pandemic. So customers needed assets related to those specific keywords. So at first they were searching for the virus itself, the enemy, so to speak, and using assets in that way. And then in a couple of weeks, we saw it shift to a different reality, like looking for Zoom backgrounds and those kinds of things, trying to have fun with that. But now the narrative's changed around topics like homeschooling and education and remote learning, like BrainStation does, wellness and other things, and then shifted again to Black Lives Matter and Pride. So one of the things that we did is, in looking at these trends, is what can we do to surface content that is related to these searches that might be even more inspiring than what they're looking for. So we were able to quickly ramp up groups of images that were related to these keyword searches. So if you were to search for COVID, say, you would see collections of images at the top, not interfering, but giving you collections of things around wellness and working from home, hopefully helping people get to other areas related to that. And then also, if you search for Zoom backgrounds, it's a fun one. We had a collection called Not My Beautiful Home, so you can fake it. And another one that's called Otherworldly, which has a lot of assets that look like Jason's real, actual room. But they're really fun ways.
Yeah, that's a real background, everyone. That is a real background.
Yeah. But just to round it out, we're also seeing a lot of new customers and contributors coming in. So supporting those new people that are in Shutterstock for the first time. And it's a great time for creatives to learn and establish new habits and see how they can contribute to the community.
That's awesome.
In terms of shifting to working remotely, I think for the Times, in the past, it's a challenge. It's a 150-year-old company, and it doesn't change overnight. But I think when this happened and we all went 100% remote, there was just so much that we learned best practices from the technology group because they are a little bit more comfortable with operating in a remote way. And we formed like working groups. We've been experimenting a lot, and it's actually worked out really well. I think because working 100% remote is a little bit easier than like having half and half. And we've been really mindful about checking in on each other. I think that we've also been really, really open about talking about the challenges of working from home as well. Some people have, childcare, elder care situations, and just being more flexible about that. And I think I really appreciate that, my colleagues are just so willing to talk about these things. And I think that has really helped support that. And I think, we're all seeing maybe this can work, and there's still conversations going around that. But I think it is just making sure that we continue to have? Like, you know, what are those challenges? How can we support you? Are there ways that we can, you know, work together as groups, or like have just time to spend together that isn't work, to bond. And in terms of our customers, I mean, we were seeing so much anxiety around the news, around, you know, and that people needed to sometimes just pause. But that we, you know, the Times isn't just the news. We offer so much more than that. And so with that more of a service first mentality, we created a section called At Home that is now part of the home screen. It's also now a print, part of the print section on the weekends. And it's really about like supporting folks, you know, in navigating, like being at home. And it happened so quickly. It was really amazing. So it's like answering that need of people to deal with that anxiety, but also like at that subscription level, we're doing a lot around experimenting with how can we support folks who feel like they have that anxiety about the news, but you know, they just need a break. It's not like they want to like totally break up with the Times for forever, but it's just like, you know, I just need a little time. So what can we do to help support that? So that's accelerating. So I'm excited about like all of the initiatives that we're doing around that. But, you know, I think that it's balancing the need for people to be informed, which they really want, but then there's also the anxiety and how to balance those. And, you know, coronavirus kind of just amps that up. So,
and I think just on the Times front, what I will give you guys enormous kudos around is how you've appealed to people's demand and desire for data visualization, and how you've embedded that into your entire product. I don't know if you touched that team, but I'd just like to say to that team, thank you and congrats, because you've made the consumption of very complex levels and layers of data that people want and need because they want to get deep into the facts. You guys have made it so easy for anyone to understand. And that, I guess, is changing behaviors from the point of view of, I need to understand the details of these cases and how this all happened, and you've boiled it down so beautifully. So thank you. Yeah, awesome. Great. I want to move on to another question here. Klaus, perhaps you could lead this with Jason following. If you had to name the top 3 considerations when designing digital experiences, what would those be in your mind?
Yeah, this was not an easy question, and I'm really grateful that you prompted this one in advance, because I feel I have a lot of intuitions around this, but I know that often the things that, as my career coach actually says, the things that make the best sense aren't always common sense. So I've thought a lot about this. So please forgive me if my answer sounds complicated. I look at it all through the lens of 2 things. The need to be philosophically and behaviorally human-centered and systems aware. So think humans and systems. When I think about that, the 3 most important things are, first, be helpful and human. The second, and I'll elaborate on these a little bit. Be helpful and human is number 1. Secondly, be harmless. Do no harm. That should be no stranger to Jason and the thinking at Google. And I'm saying systems aware. And I know that contextual awareness, is a technical software term, but it's something that we all must be. I think, yeah, even the age of COVID has made systemic issues, not just COVID. I'm sorry, not COVID. COVID is a part of it, but the systemic racism that has been brought to light for everyone is a perfect example of where systems matter and should not be ignored. But be helpful and human. We start by getting crisp on what the problem is that we're solving, and know that the problems that we're solving are human problems. We have to ask, do people need this? Will they use it? We need to listen. We need to learn from our customers. Try to get past our own biases and know that lead with empathy and understanding, and then talk to them like we know them. The next part, this is pretty easy. Do no harm. That there's elements of security. Yes, that could be technical. But it's also psychological safety. How safe are we making customers feel? How actually safe are we keeping them? That leads to thoughts on accessibility and equitability. We have to be fair and just we can't be just fair. So the last one is systems aware. We need to understand, articulate, and always reference the interconnectivity of the thing we're solving for to the systems and the humans that support it. We need to, like, I always think of it in terms of bookends. I can't be concerned about just this one piece of this experience. I need to know, how did the customer come into this experience and where will they go next? That kind of context is incredibly important. So be helpful and human, do no harm, and systems aware.
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic answer. I think maybe where I can add a little will be, I guess, less so from the kind of 50,000 foot view, and maybe if I'll take more kind of the tactical approach, would just be thinking about this idea of like truly committing to focus about the value that you're offering, right? So if you are opening a product or you're opening a feature, and that primary value offering that you guys care about as a company is not screaming at the customer, you messed up. Somebody didn't say no somewhere, right? Mm-hmm. Like, too many people were like, yeah, okay, sure, we can add that. Like, let's, compromise on this. Let's do that. Like, I think the biggest challenge with these digital products is because they're so easily buildable, there can be less care and kind of less commitment to clarity in it, because it's like, well, we can fix it later, right? So think about how, buildings have been made over time. You can't think about it in the same way. So there needs to be all this kind of focus. I think just truly having a commitment to that focus of, okay, what is the thing that we're trying to get people to do? What are we trying to offer them? Is it obvious to them? And then, the rest of the functionality, the rest of the offerings can, complement that. But I really think that, like one tactical thing would just be truly committing to that focus and making sure that that value prop is not cluttered. It's not fighting with other things that you have to offer the customer.
I loved when you just said somebody didn't say no. So it's like, as designers, we see that all the time.
Yeah.
It's so true.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you, guys. Anyone else want to build on that in terms of considerations? If not, I can move on. Awesome. That's a great question, and thank you so much for the answers, guys. Moving on to the next one, starting with Aaron, and hopefully Klaus, you can follow, and others, obviously. What types of data does your team consider when making design decisions? Can you give an example of an insight that led to a feature change or update? Yeah,
I think we're definitely looking at all the standard channels for data, and we're trying to look at relative KPIs in the whatever we're interested in looking at. But I think the points I want to make here is to look at the data outside of that and where you wouldn't expect to see things. So I have two examples. The first one is we were having a close look at our engagement data, and they're engaging with this save to collection feature, but not as much as they should. It's the main thing you want to do in Shutterstock, right? Is collect things so that you can purchase them later on. So looking at that, we definitely wanted to figure out ways to better make it easier for people to onboard to this feature if they didn't know where it was. So we had, in UX, we had a sneaking suspicion. We knew what the problem was. We had this icon that was a circle with a plus in it to indicate that you're saving something, which is close to the icon that John Oringer picked when he first started the company. Mm-hmm. Holy crap, it's time to change that, right? Well, sometimes changing an icon takes a lot of, decisions, but we pushed it through really quickly. We tried a heart, we tried a star, we got it on the site, and holy crap, we saw a ton of engagement. And so, sometimes there's those things that are like legacy things on the site, and you're like, oh, I don't know if I want to fight for that right now. It's worth it. It's worth it. It's worth it. On native apps alone, when we changed the icon, we saw an 86% increase in engagement on Android, 50% on iOS. So it was huge. The second part is to consider data that might be overlooked or otherwise not really present a normal opportunity. And I will go back to the AR example I gave earlier, and that came from user interviews. So we have qualitative interviews that we do with people, And I would get on the phone with people that loved our native app, and they're like, man, you know what I love to do? I love to scroll through all the images and pretend that they're on a wall in my house. And this woman sent me a canvas print of an image from Shutterstock, and it was like, And Adrian, the developer I worked with when we had the hackathon idea, was like, this is something we can highlight our AR technology for. So we were able to productize that and get that out in the world and highlight that. So it's definitely looking for patterns to go after things that you otherwise might be scared to go after to make change, and then also looking outside the norm.
Awesome. Anyone else want to build on that?
I just want to say, Aaron, you touched on the quant versus qual.
Sure.
And I wanted to say, like, when I think about the data, yes, scads of data that is available to any digital company, but nothing is more informative and helpful. I know in our case, the best data comes from frontline associates and call center associates, and those people who are actually interfacing with the customers, the users, to understand what are the hurdles that they're facing. I go one step further, even in understanding how a call center support agent, the things that they wrestle with in terms of answering the customer's questions, that starts to reveal a whole set of those systemic issues that might be technology related, or just like all kinds of things bubble up, and then you get the sense of how the technology influences the relationship and vice versa. So I think in a manner of making that part of our practice, one of the things that we've done that I think everyone loves on our team is to incorporate our CSST leads into our weekly rituals. So they're not just coming to us and helping us understand how call centers, what are the prioritizations or rank order of the most important issues that they're dealing with at any time, but what we're helping them understand how we're improving the product and how we're iterating. And so what's happening, I think, with pretty great speed, is that they're starting to get more excited and understanding how the feedback they provide us the feedback that they provide to us helps us improve the experience. So now they have contextual awareness now of what's happening on the back end to support the thing that's happening on the front end that customer's wrestling with. Like, there's a shared understanding there that I think lifts all boats.
Brilliant. I think people, when I said data in that question, probably immediately thought numerical data, when data is so broad nowadays and you need to be comfortable with all formats of data to be able to inform your design. Thanks for bringing that out and highlighting that, Klaus. I want to move to another question here. Tracy, maybe you can lead this one. In terms of what design skills and new tools are you and your team looking to develop or work with over the next few years or closer in?
Well, I think for me, what's top of mind is this issue of diversity and inclusion and how we can empower teams and develop culture. I think that is the skill that is going to really drive innovation for design. Like, I think having people not just like in the room, but feeling like they have agency over the products themselves and having that voice, because it's just so important to have folks from different perspectives. And I don't think we're doing a really good job now as an industry in thinking about this and equipping our teams for that. And so, I think that conversation has started. I mean, it's been going for a long time, but I think it's come, top of mind in the past month or so. Mm-hmm. But I think for all of us, this is the thing within leadership that, we're discussing, and, what is the impact that we're actually trying to make, and having everyone at every level, participating and building on that. So that's the biggest thing for me. It's like, I think that, skills, tools can absolutely be taught, but I think that this is more of like a structural thing. I think to Klaus's point, it's like you're thinking about that system, the system of your team, because that's what ends up, that's what creates the product in the end, right? And how are you building those things for, and making sure that you're thinking about your audience in a more inclusive way as well, that you're not just thinking of it as like, oh, it's just like an edge case there. No, those are like stress cases, and you should be designing for that first. And so I think like all of these things that we need to be thinking about now. So
really interesting. Anyone else want to build on that? Yeah, I think the idea of equitability and inclusivity as a skill is something that people need to frame in their minds as the ability of adding more value to a product. Absolutely. Brilliant. Thanks, Tracy. I think the next question is applicable to all of you, and I'd love all of you to weigh in, perhaps starting with Jason, then Aaron. Is there a brand other than your own that you think really upped their design or digital experience game this past year, and what made it so memorable? Are there any other leaders in the space that you'd want to mention?
Yeah, I mean, saying the whole year is like interesting challenge, but I think the first thing that comes to mind for me was just Apple with their WWDC presentation. I think for a lot of the like Apple fanboys and nerds out there, we were really curious to see what that keynote was going to be like, because for the last 10 years, they've pretty much defined what it means to share what new products, what new approaches they're going to be bringing to market, and what that format looks like, right? Everyone's imitating the idea of like the Apple keynote. And so it was super interesting for me to think through like, okay, well, wonder what they're going to do. Is it going to be pre-recorded or whatever? And yeah, in terms of just like a digital experience, like I feel like they knocked it out of the park. It was super engaging. I really enjoyed it. And I would not be surprised if, regardless of what the future of safety in close quarters is like, I think that they'll probably do something quite similar to that moving forward, because it was fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think when I was looking at this question, though, I thought of like some smaller brands that are doing well too, especially in COVID times. And in my recent class at BrainStation, we talk about people's favorite apps, and people are talking about meditation apps like Calm and Headspace. And so I started digging in on that, and Headspace has done a lot of work to try to support people better in times of COVID, and making things a little bit easier to get in, a little bit more free and supportive there. They've done a lot of updates as well. The other one that jumps out at me, and this is just because I love this interface, is Robinhood. And so Robinhood now offers fractional shares, and Stash is doing fractional shares for some time. But I love the way that Robinhood's interface works, and they just make something that's really complicated so simple. And then they also have like a messaging strategy on like, we know you're losing money right now, but it's going to get better. Here's what you can do to prepare. So I love that there's like that kind of personal message that they're doing too. So I think smaller brands like that are also accelerating or doing different things. Yeah.
Klaus, do you want to go next?
I'm chomping at the bit on this one. Great examples, both of those. I'm going to date myself with this. When I think about people who are inspirational or doing the right things, a leader in the space, if you will. He's been around for a long time. But Jason Fried of Basecamp, formerly 37 Signals. I had read the 37 Signals Manifesto. That was like back in 2000. It was just it was about website design. You could read the 37 Signals Manifesto and you can think, oh, I can apply this to any interactive or digital engaging experience. So watching the evolution of Basecamp, the idea that they would, it's not a question of fewer features or less features, although they pushed back on feature requests for years, which I think really helped them distinguish themselves from all the other content management systems or project management systems. But rather, more important, that we elevate the features that matter most to the customer at that moment in their journey. So don't worry about having every feature available, but how can we make those features that matter most at that time? This comes back to contextual awareness. How do we make those things appear first And proving that point, they just released the beta of Hey. It's a ridiculously simple email app. Now, nobody wants to switch emails these days, but what they've basically reduced it to email being 3 things. It's, things that you want to respond to, things that you need to respond to, things that you want to read, and then receipts. That the things that you need to keep in your inbox or at least have access to. Like it seems like an oversimplification, like the kind of thing that's not going to be desirable for everyone. But in the age of COVID, when we're all trying to we're all overwhelmed with all the stuff coming at us, something like that is pretty ridiculously awesome in its simplicity.
Love it. And Tracy?
I'm going to give a publishing example. I think The Atlantic has done a fantastic job of pivoting to a subscription-first model. The rebrand was like, it's so beautiful. I think that the print edition is amazing. And I think they've also kind of figured out that it was like, oh, it's about share of time. It's not just about like the content, right? That they're developing like those relationships. Like, I don't want the Times to be the only publishing company out there. We see that as like, share of time. It's like we're fighting for time against like Spotify, against like Netflix, and I think like The Atlantic has like started to get that too, which I thought was really interesting. And it's been so successful. Like, I think that and the content, it's like, it's great. There are having multiple voices out there is just really amazing to see, because I think, it's like the publishing industry, it feels like it can be so dire sometimes. And so I think that there are like these points of light where it's like The Atlantic is making it work. Like, I want to see like more sort of like innovation and thinking about like building relationships with people, and getting, and thinking of it in that way. So it was just exciting to see.
Great examples, guys. Awesome. Thank you so much. Last question of the panel questions. And this can be a really quick one from each of you. What are your favorite design resources that help you stay up to date for those that are tuning in looking for additional resources? Let's go in the same order. Jason, Aaron, Klaus, and Tracy.
Twitter.com. You got to listen to the kids, bro. Everything that's happening fast, it's happening there. And I feel like the youth defines the culture, so we need to listen to them. So it's not necessarily a traditional design resource per se, but that's where a lot of the kind of cultural language comes from. And so, yeah, that's like the first place that I look at when I'm looking for inspiration.
Yeah, I will say I want to plug this Shutterstock blog real quick, not because I was told to, because there's actually good content on there. We have our trends that come out every single year, and they're actually based on data inside Shutterstock to predict trends in design. So that's a really great resource. They also have good resources if you are a YouTube content creator like I am. There's all kinds of good things in there. But other than that, some podcasts that I love is This Week in Tech. It's called Twit. And it's a great way to stay up to speed on all things technology so that you know what you're talking about at the water cooler or the digital water cooler. Mm-hmm. And then also 99% Invisible, which I think, probably a lot of people are aware of, but they definitely go into like the fringes of design and architecture and tell you really interesting stories that are inspirational to designers, but I think everybody.
Yeah.
I guess I'm next. Can you, did I unmute myself? Yeah, I did. All right. I have to admit, I don't go seeking out UX or experience design. What I find myself gravitating to are more, a podcast. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I think they're the ones that do teardowns of an experience or help you understand the processes behind business and innovation. So it would be podcasts like Recode, Decode with Kara Swisher, where they do interviews with tech executives and startups, politicians, and we'll learn about how they come about big idea creation. Another one is How I Built This with Guy Raz. Another great way to get some real insight into all the failures and hurdles that some of your favorite brands have had to overcome. And finally, I think as a musician, I am a musician, a hack musician, but I find Song Exploder has blown my mind, where you then understand, you get to hear artists, musicians talk about the creative process and the way they foster ideas and cultivate ideas. That stuff to me is like really good fodder that we can apply to every day as we reconcile consumer with business requirements.
Yeah. Thanks, Klaus. And Tracy?
I love all of these examples. Twitter is definitely, I'm there a lot. I would also recommend like old school email newsletters. One of my favorites is Mule Design, Mike Montero and Erica Hall, maybe super old school, but it's, I think I really love their perspective. They talk a lot about like what your responsibility is as a designer and having those conversations. So I think that it's like broadening that perspective is always really good, looking for those kinds of things. I've also found that conferences that I've been to that set up Slack communities have been really, really helpful. Leading Design is a really great one. So just trying to build community when you do meet in real life. I mean, that was in the before times, but it's like having opportunities to talk with other people that like, I'm always just looking for that because I think it's through that like one-on-one connection, meeting younger designers, just chatting with them, getting their perspective. I think that can be really, really powerful. So.
Awesome, guys. Thank you so much. Okay, we've got 5 minutes. This is going to be rapid fire. I'd love to see how quickly you guys can answer these questions. And we'll get through as many of them as possible. I want to start here. This is a question for everyone. Let's go Aaron, Klaus, Jason, and Tracy. My screen changed positions there. When you think about the most successful designers what is one trait that they all have in common? Aaron.
It's curiosity. Honestly, you got to be curious.
Klaus?
Same, +1.
Awesome.
Strong opinions that are loosely held.
Cool.
Humility. I think listening to other people is really, really important.
That's awesome. Love those guys. There is a question here from Robert. I'm curious to hear about how you all entered the field, whether it was a career change after working in another industry or something you had studied for a long period of time before landing your first job. Aaron, Klaus, Jason, Tracy.
Yeah, the nutshell answer to that is I worked at an art gallery when I was young and we needed to design flyers. And so I had MS Publisher and I designed flyers and I became a designer. But I did not do that in school. I actually have my degree in psychology, but I did designing the whole time. Before UX was a thing, I was doing websites and such. So I really fell into it naturally. And once UX became a thing, I was like, yeah, this makes sense for me.
Nice.
I had a high school teacher that very grateful. I'm so grateful for the fact that she recognized that I had a passion for art and an interest in computers. And this is going way back, but she pointed me to computer-aided design courses at University of Central Florida way back in the day. That was my entree, and then as I was in college in bands making flyers and designing album covers and realizing that this world of design, it touches so many things. That was my intro.
Awesome.
Not dissimilar to Klaus. Instead of going to college, I decided to take my band and start doing tours for the first time. And so, yeah, building out this idea of a band and trying to build a product that gets people excited and eventually being able to say that we were like a national touring act with like record label and stuff like that. Like this idea of being able to push yourself and build in that way, super important. And to me, it's the same thing as doing a startup.
Yeah, I didn't study design, but I always had an interest in computers and art as well. And so when I got out of school, I was like, well, what am I going to do? How am I going to make a living? And I was like, well, I can kind of build websites. I know HTML and CSS a little bit, and that's how I fell into it, and then just kind of stuck with it. And then when UX became a thing, like entered that, and it just kind of went from there. But it's like I really love that intersection of, I think, like technology and working with people and just like solving problems in a way.
Yeah, the beautiful thing about user experience design, you don't have to come from a creative background per se. Question here from Raphael, question for all panelists. What would you say helps someone that's just starting on the design area without any previous design experience?
Same order, yeah. So what helps? Like really get in there and try to learn some things. Like I've definitely taken a lot of coding courses, built my own things, constantly curious, as I mentioned. There's lots of material out there where you can build your own bots for your Google Home or something. So like really learn more in the industry and then how to design and problem solve for that. I think that's a great way to
and take one of your classes.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I'll pile up on that. Remain curious and look for other examples in the industry. I think some of the best designers I know don't have a design background. You mentioned psychology. That's a powerful weapon. Get to know some PhDs and psychologists who are working around human-centered anything and understand that space.
Stop trying to be good at everything. Try to find something that you're really excited about and that you are willing to put the time in. Get really good at that, because what you learn there will basically apply to everything else. It takes time.
Okay.
And then find your community once you find that passion, because then you'll get support from other people. Don't feel like you're alone in this, because there are other people who, might know how to do something better, and you can ask them questions, or, if you're having a hard time with it, that they can be like, you can do it. And I think that's so important, because it's like, you don't need to be alone. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much, guys. And I'm going to take 30 seconds to wrap up a few points that I think those that have tuned in can take away with them. The first is that innovative brands have fostered a culture of innovation with a safe space for ideation and a shared language. The second is that designs have to be human-centered with a focus on immediate user need, but don't lose track of the long-term relationships. And finally, always listen to what your users are telling you and consider overlooked data. Guys, it's been an absolute pleasure and privilege to have you all on this panel. I know that everyone tuned in is going to take so much away from this. You're all wonderful humans, and thank you for all the work that you do in your companies. And I wish you all well for the rest of the summer. And thank you to those that have tuned in. And hopefully we'll see you on our next installment of the Digital Leadership Series. Until then, take care and stay well, everyone.